Zach, I wanted to start the show by talking a little bit about something that's pretty exciting. It wasn't necessarily a huge surprise, but definitely something that I was glad to see. And that's Zohran Mandani officially getting the endorsement of Bernie. I love Bernie's graphic team. Whoever they have working back there does such a great job with these kind of classy, sometimes sort of retro feeling posters and graphics, stuff like that. So I was super excited to see this. Obviously, Bernie joining AOC. And Zohran says, as for so many across this country, Bernie Sanders has been the single most influential political figure in my life. As mayor, I will strive to live up to his example by fighting for the working class every day and hopefully make Brooklyn's own proud. And that's important to mention at the end there. A lot of people obviously these days associate Bernie with Vermont, but he is from Brooklyn. Of course, he used to talk about the Brooklyn, what was it, the Brooklyn Dodgers or whatever.
Yeah, Brooklyn Dodgers.
Yeah.
Broke his heart as a young man when he saw the power of monopoly, and they uprooted themselves from this caring and compassionate and devoted fan base all the way across the country to Los Angeles.
Yeah, exactly. Also, some people saying that might be Zohran team's
I think
graphics.
it was Zohran's team that did the.
Well, either way, they might have the same graphic designer because these look a lot. They look very similar to the posters that Bernie's been putting out there for the Fight the Oligarchy tour. So yeah, that person might have found some extra work with Zohran's team, perhaps. Either way, great stuff. Really proud to see that. Really happy to see that. And again, Bernie's popularity cannot be undersold. I think that more so than anyone besides maybe AOC, this is hugely meaningful, and I think also strategically timed potentially. You know, some people were giving AOC shit for not endorsing Zohran earlier, but you guys got to keep in mind these candidates. They don't want to peak too soon. They don't want to, put all their chips on the table, have all their big endorsements come out too early in the process. No, they want the momentum to build at the proper pace, and for that trajectory of victory to develop in a real way. So I think it actually is a good idea for these endorsements to come like in a more staggered sense. And this is the pivotal moment. This is a great time for Bernie to come out here.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, both Zohran and Bernie Sanders have chef's kiss graphic design teams. Zohran's video team has also been doing excellent work. And I think that's something that the left understands to prioritize, right? Is that you have to be able to reach people. You need to be eye catching. Yes, you have to have a great message, but having a great marketing strategy behind it is really what threads the needle. I completely agree. And your point about not wanting to peak too soon is a really prescient one, Gavin. A lot of people will remember in the 2020 primary race, there was a time when Elizabeth Warren looked like the all-star. There was a time when it looked like Elizabeth Warren was going to be the breakout candidate. She was polling number one in October of 2019 for the Democratic primary candidates. And people were like, Bernie's done. He had his heart attack. It's not going to happen. He's too old. Look at this younger woman. We need a woman to do it. It's her time. And all of the polling was suggesting that Elizabeth Warren was surging and that Bernie Sanders was stalling, right? She didn't surpass him by a ton, but she did surpass him. And what happened? She peaked entirely too soon. She put out the kind of phony, like plagiarized Medicare for all that was like, I'm not going to raise your taxes by a cent, and made it like way crummier and way less effective than the strategy that Bernie Sanders had put forth with his Medicare for all bill. And it all fell apart from there, right? Because there wasn't anything to thrust her back into the limelight. She had a really good moment on the debate stage against Mike Bloomberg, but Mike Bloomberg was irrelevant. So it didn't really do her any good long term. So that's really important to remember when people like AOC come out closer to the primary date, when Bernie Sanders comes the weekend before the primary date and says, hey, vote for Zohran. That's so people are looking at this guy and it's fresh in their mind. They're like, oh shit, even Bernie wants me to vote for this guy. All right, I'll show up and vote for this guy. And Bernie released a really nice statement of his own on Zohran. Oops, let me pull this one up right here. He said, we need a new politics and new leadership, which is prepared to stand up to powerful corporate interests and fight for the working class. Zohran Mamdani is running an inspirational grassroots campaign centered on the construction of 200,000 affordable housing units, a rent freeze, free public buses, cutting fines and fees for small businesses, investing in citywide mental health services, city-owned grocery stores, and universal free childcare and a minimum wage increase. He will pay for this agenda by asking corporations and the richest 1% of New Yorkers to pay their fair share in taxes. Unlike the corporate Democratic establishment, Zohran is funding his campaign largely through small dollar donations, including more than 27,000 individual contributions. At this pivotal and dangerous moment in American history, status quo politics is not good enough. We need the kind of visionary leadership that Zohran is providing in his campaign. In my view, Zohran Mandani is the best choice for mayor of New York City. And this is going to reach this new era of like resistance liberals who have flocked to Bernie Sanders and potentially a base voter in New York City, right? Somebody who was like, you know what, for a long time, I wasn't really sure about Bernie Sanders, but I think he's right. I think he predicted the situation that we're in now, and I'm going to trust his judgment because I do not support Andrew Cuomo and I do not want him to win. I think it's powerful.
Yeah, it is. Speaking of liberals, let's check on what a many liberals' favorite publication had to offer to this contribution. I thought this was absolutely crazy. Here we have the New York Times coming out as anyone but Mandani. And it's interesting that Bernie did his endorsement today. It might have been kind of in direct response to this, which dropped yesterday, or at least, I think it was planned, like I said, but I think the timing might have been intentional. Again, this is crazy, and very typical for the New York Times. Kind of reminds me of their 2020 endorsement where they went with Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar. But this one's even worse. So it says the polls indicate that two candidates have emerged as the frontrunner. Andrew Cuomo, a former governor and federal housing secretary, and Zohran Mandani, a state legislator who represents a Queens district. Mr. Mandani, a characteristic or charismatic 33-year-old, is running a joyful campaign full of viral videos in which he talks with voters. He offers the kind of fresh political style for which many people are hungry during the angry era of President Trump. Unfortunately, Mamdani is running on an agenda uniquely unsuited to the city's challenges. He's a democratic socialist who too often ignores the unavoidable trade-offs of governance. He favors rent freezes that could restrict housing supply and make it harder for younger New Yorkers and new arrivals to find housing. He wants the government to operate grocery stores as if consumer service and retail sales were strengths of the public sector. He minimizes the importance of policing. Zach, most worrisome, he shows little concern about the disorder of the past decade, even though its costs have fallen hardest on the city's working class and poor residents. Mr. Mamdani, who is called Mr. de Blasio, the best New York mayor of his lifetime, not that there's a ton of competition. That's
probably true.
Yeah, it probably is true. I mean, like I said, there's not really that much competition. The bar is pretty low. Offers an agenda that remains alluring among elite progressives, but has proved damaging to city life. So this is only a guy who appeals to elite progressives, Zach. Mamdani would also bring less relevant experience than perhaps any mayor in New York City. He has never run a government department or private organization of any size. As a state legislature, he has struggled to execute his own agenda. A telling example came last year, yada, yada, yada. And they're saying he lacks the political savvy and instinct for compromise that has made Bernie Sanders, his fellow Democratic Socialist, an effective legislature. And of course, Bernie has become more known for his instinct to compromise as he's gotten older. Back when he was, mayor of Burlington, I don't think he was quite as into that. Either way, Zohran's definitely at the beginning of his career, unlike Bernie, who's at a very different stage of his. The New York Times goes on to say, we see arguments for ranking several candidates at the top of the ballot, including Mr. Lander for more progressive voters and Mr. Tilson for more moderate voters. Although Cuomo and Mandani have dominated the polls, another candidate could still emerge as the election day winner. Given those polls, however, the crucial choice may end up being where, if at all, voters decide to rank Cuomo or Mandani. We believe that Mamdani deserves a spot we do not believe that Mr. Mamdani deserves a spot on New Yorkers' ballots. His experience is too thin, and his agenda reads like a turbocharged version of de Blasio's dismaying mayoralty. As for Cuomo, we have serious objections to his ethics and conduct, even if he would be better for New York's future than Mr. Mamdani. So this is a total farce. It's completely stupid. For one, they don't provide any reasons why Cuomo would be better for New York's future. But in reality, this is a non-endorsement. They don't end up endorsing anyone. It's really just a smear. It's really just a hit piece on Zohran, which sounds like it was written by the fucking Cuomo campaign. And it would have been one thing if they at least had the balls to actually endorse someone like Brad Lander, who's now in the news for reasons we'll talk about in a second. It would have been, it would have been one thing for them to do that, but they really didn't endorse anyone. They just told people a bunch of reasons why Zohran Mandani is a terrible choice. And like I said, it basically just reads like it was written by the Cuomo campaign.
Yeah, 100%. And this was something that we saw all across mainstream media outlets. All of the chin stroke liberals came out from under the rocks they were hiding under to attack Zohran. And this one right here, New York is not a democracy. Could ranked choice voting help Zohran Mamdani beat Andrew Cuomo? And this is Ezra Klein's wife, right? So somebody got in a lot of hot water yesterday for tweeting out like the most important thing people need to understand about this article is that it was written by Ezra Klein's wife. And so people were all like, wow, woke scolding this guy. But I think it's true, right? The kind of person that Ezra Klein would marry would probably be somebody that shared his neoliberal worldview, somebody that really believed in technocracy and bureaucrats and all that kind of shit. And the reality is Zohran scares the fuck out of those people, right? They do not want him to be mayor. Why? Because he's going to try his damnedest to deliver on his campaign promises, right? He's going to go out there and he is going to use every means at his disposal to make New York City more affordable for regular New Yorkers. And that's something that terrifies the people who have tried to turn New York City into a Disneyland for
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there. Be there. The Vanguard will be there. Be there.